Welcome to day 11, monitoring and controlling process group. Say the course, ensuring alignment with the plan. So, objectives for day 11. Understand the purpose and significance of the monitoring and controlling process group. Learn the key processes, including monitoring and controlling project work, and perform integrated change control. Explore tools and techniques for tracking performance and managing changes, and then prepare for situational and knowledge-based questions on monitoring and controlling. So, the overview of monitoring and controlling process group. Monitoring and controlling process group ensures that project stays on track by comparing actual performance against the baselines for scope, schedule, cost, and quality. It also involves making adjustments through formal change management processes when deviations occur. This group concurrently runs with other process groups and focuses on maintaining control throughout the project lifecycle. So, as we've said before, this process group runs simultaneously or in parallel with the execution process. Why is that important? Well, as you are tracking and gaining, let's say this, as you're getting the raw information from, or raw data from your execution process group, you are putting that into these analysis tools that you will use during the monitoring and controlling process group in order to track whether or not you are on your baseline, right? Meaning you are ahead of schedule, you are on schedule, you're behind schedule, right? You are over budget, you're under budget, right? You're right on budget, right? What is your earned value management? We'll get into what that is. And so you basically monitor how your execution phase is going in order to jot down the issues that we're going with it and implement changes that can be there, put into the change control process, proved, and then put right back into the execution phase so that you can execute your project on time and on budget. So key processes that you'll see in the monitoring and controlling process group, we're gonna start with the first one that's the most important, is monitor and control project work, right? So a lot of these other processes go into this, but we'll start with this as the overview. So the monitor and control project work process involves tracking, reviewing, and regulating the project progress and performance to ensure that it stays aligned with the project management plan. This process is like keeping your finger on the pulse of a project. It helps you understand whether the project is on track and whether adjustments are needed. So imagine you're driving to a destination using GPS. GPS tracks your progress, provides real-time updates on your route, and informs you if you need to make adjustments due to traffic or road closure. The monitor and control project work process does something similar for a project. It monitors the project status against the plan and helps the project manager decide if corrective actions are needed. So why is it important? Well, it ensures alignment with the plan. Process ensures that the project's actual performance is aligned with the project management plan, helping to identify deviations early and take corrective actions before they become significant issues. So that's important, right? Where you guys are deciding or using this information to decide whether or not you need to have some corrective actions implemented. A lot of these corrective actions will be ones that you have already planned for in your project management plan, but let's say you have a risk that actualizes, right? Now you're putting in a pre-identified change request that you will use to mitigate that risk that was actualized, right? And so this is important because as you gain that information from the performance data and you analyze it using your analyzation tools that we'll kind of show off in here and allude to, you want to make sure that you are staying on top of that information. You're staying on top of what percentage variation triggers that need for change or that risk mitigation technique implementation. And so it's important that you pay attention to that as we move through this stuff. You'll gain a better understanding as we move through the ITTOs, as well as we get into the other processes for this process. So why is it important? Well, the second thing is that it supports decision making. By continuously tracking progress and generating performance reports, project managers and stakeholders can make informed decisions to keep the project on track. Exactly what we were just talking about. Facilitates proactive management, right? This process allows project managers to identify potential issues or variances in a timely manner. This helps in taking proactive measures rather than reacting to the problems after they escalate. And so one of the things that you're tracking for when you look at once you've analyzed the raw data is trends, right? Where are you trending? Are you trending behind schedule? Are you 5%? Are you hitting those trigger points to where you're 5%, 10%, 15% variance under budget or over budget or things like that? So that's what you want to pay attention to because that's going to help you be proactive and managing risk. Inputs to monitor and control project work. So project management plan. Project management plan provides the baseline for monitoring and controlling the project, right? It has a schedule baseline, right? The cost baseline, right? All these things, scope baseline. And so you'll use that as reference points to determine where you are in your project. You also have the work performance information, right? It includes data on the status of deliverables, schedule progress, and cost performance. It helps to understanding the project's current state. And then you have EEFs and OPAs that you will use. And like I said, those are in every single process that you'll see here. Tools and techniques for monitoring and controlling project work. Data analysis, like I said, you'll use variance analysis, trend analysis. These are things that you'll be using using in order to determine whether or not these triggers have been hit, adjustments need to be made, or whether or not you're on track and on pace to hit the predictions or baselines that you had projected. 2, decision-making techniques, right? So decision-making techniques help determine the best course of action based on the analysis of the project data. It could involve choosing whether to take corrective action, prevent issues, or make changes to the project plan. An example of this is if schedule variance is detected, decision-making skills might help decide whether to allocate additional resources or extend the timeline. Outputs of this process you're going to see a work performance report. They're formal documents that present work performance information in a way that can be used for decision making. Example of this is a monthly progress report, might include visual charts showing the project schedule status, cost variances, and completed milestones. Then you also have change requests. When deviations from the plan are detected, change requests might be issued to modify the project scope, schedule, or budget. These requests go through the Perform Integrated Change Control process for approval. So an example is if a project is behind schedule, change requests might be submitted to approve additional resources to speed up the progress. And we'll get into how you could speed up the progress and manage the schedule or cost as you move forward. 2, perform integrated change control, right? And so pay attention to how we orient and we use these processes in chronological order, because as you see, some of these processes are integrated within each other, and they're going to support one another as you move into whether or not their inputs or tools and techniques and things like that. So the Perform Integrated Change Control process is about evaluating, approving, or rejecting changes that are requested during the project. Changes can come from many sources: stakeholders, unforeseen issues, or identified improvements, but they need to be controlled in order to avoid negatively impacting the project's objectives. So imagine you're renovating your kitchen and you decide halfway through that you want different countertop. You need to evaluate the impact of this change on cost, schedule, and design. Perform Integrated Change Control works similarly. It ensures that every change is assessed in terms of its impact on the entire project before a decision is made. Why is it important? Well, just like the other process, it ensures project alignment. The process ensures that any changes within the project are aligned with the project's objectives, and that's important because you want to stay on scope. You don't want scope creep to happen, because now you're deviating from what you originally intended to solve. And so this is going to help you minimize risks. Evaluating changes help identify potential risks and impacts associated with implementing those changes. This also helps you minimize disruptions and ensures that the changes are beneficial rather than detrimental to the project. It also helps you maintain control, right? So by having a structured change control process, the project manager ensures that the changes are only implemented after thorough evaluation and approval, maintaining consistency and alignment with the project's overall plan, but also consistency in what the stakeholders want. Some of the outputs that you'll see, or tools and techniques that you'll see. Okay, my bad. Moving into the ITTOs, right? Inputs for this are you're going to see your change requests. Change requests are proposals for changes to the project scope, schedule, budget, or any other type of project element. 2, project management plan, right? You're using the project management plan to evaluate the impact of these proposed changes. Work performance report, right? These reports provide insights into the project's current status and are used to determine if the changes are necessary to address performance issues, right? So tools and techniques that you'll use during integrated change control is change control tools, right? They're systems used to document, track, and manage change requests throughout the project. These tools ensure that changes happen systematically and are systematically evaluated and improved before implementation. You also need expert judgment, as with any other process. Experts help assess the potential impact of proposed changes and determine the feasibility of implementing. And then meetings, right? The Change Control Board, or CCB, meetings are often held to evaluate and or approve or reject change requests. The CCB typically includes key stakeholders and experts who review the impact of proposed changes and make decisions accordingly. Outputs that you'll see from this process is approved change requests and updates to the project management plan. So the approved change requests can be implemented, but only after they've been vetted through the CCB, right? And so an example of this is a request to extend the project timeline by 2 weeks due to delays in material procurement might be approved, allowing the team to adjust their work schedule accordingly, right? And so once you have those approved change requests, you're able to implement that in the execution phase. Updates to the project management plan. The project management plan is updated to reflect any approved changes. This helps ensure that the plan is current and that all project activities are aligned with the updated scope, schedule, and cost. And so as you start to change the scope, right, you want to update that in your project management plan, because that's what you're following in your execution. Third process that we're going to talk about within this monitoring and controlling process group is validate scope. The validate scope process involves getting formal acceptance of a completed deliverable from stakeholders. It is where stakeholders review the final output of the project work and formally acknowledge that it meets the minimum requirement. This process ensures that the project deliverables align with what is initially agreed upon, and that they are acceptable to the client or stakeholder. So Think of this as you are, one, checking to make sure that the deliverables that you're working on are what the stakeholders are expecting. And so validate scope works to make sure what's a process that you have to implement to make sure. It's basically a redundant process that you use to make sure, I keep saying, but it's a redundant process put into the monitoring and controlling phase in order for you to ensure that you are aligned with the stakeholder. And if you're not, you'll find out very quickly and be able to adjust. So why is it important? It ensures deliverables meet requirements, right? Validate scope ensures that the final deliverables meet the needs and requirements specified by the stakeholder. It provides formal acceptance. Through this process, stakeholders formally accept the deliverables. And it's important because it signifies that the project has met the agreed upon criteria. It also reduces rework. By involving stakeholders in reviewing and accepting deliverables at each point, validate scope helps identify issues early, reducing the need for rework, and this helps keep the project on time and within budget. Inputs that you'll see for validate scope process is a project management plan, requirements documentation, verified deliverables, right? Read through all these things. They're specific to validate scope process, but these are all similar to what we would use in some of the other processes and what we've seen before. Tools and techniques that we have: inspection, right? So we haven't really talked about inspection, so I'll hit on it. Inspection is a key technique used in the validate scope process. It involves examining the deliverables to ensure that they meet the acceptance criteria and stakeholder requirements. For example, software project where stakeholders might inspect the application to verify that all the specified features work as intended and that the user experience is satisfactory. Review meetings, right? Meetings with the stakeholders are held to review the deliverables and confirm their acceptance. During these meetings, stakeholders formally approve or reject the deliverables based on whether they meet the defined requirements. Outputs from validate scope process that you'll see are accepted deliverables or deliverables that the stakeholders have formally approved. This means that the deliverables have met the acceptance criteria and are ready for the next steps. Also, work performance information. The work performance information provides insights into which deliverables were accepted, which were not, and any changes or improvements that need to be made. So, the fourth process that we're going to get into is a control scope process, which is about ensuring that all work remains within the defined scope of the project. It involves monitoring the project's progress and preventing unauthorized changes from expanding or reducing the project's scope without formal approval. Why is it important? Prevents scope. Why is it important? It prevents scope creep. Right? It ensures alignment with objectives and maintains control over time and costs, right? Uncontrolled changes to the project scope can lead to delays, increased costs, and resources. The other two I think are pretty self-explanatory, but you can read through them for further explanation. Some inputs that we'll see for control scope are the project management plan, requirements documentation, work performance data, variance analysis, right? Using your variance analysis for this, it helps plan work against the actual work to identify deviations from the project. So some of these we've seen before. Trend analysis, right? Used to identify patterns in scope related to data to predict potential issues before they occur, right? That's important. That's what we talked about earlier, where you're using these trend analysis in order to predict problems to solve them before they happen. And that's what a good project manager does, is you use the forewarning signs to mitigate as much risk or mitigate as much cost to the project as you can. Outputs of the control scope process is a scope baseline updates, right? If approved changes impact the project scope baseline is updated to reflect these changes. Also, some change requests. When scope deviations are identified, change requests may be submitted to formally adjust the project scope. So think of control schedule. Oh, my bad. So that's it for control scope. We're getting into control schedule process. The control schedule process involves monitoring the status of the project activities, tracking progress against the schedule, and making necessary adjustments to keep the project on track. Think of control schedule as having a control schedule as having a watchful eye on the clock throughout the race to ensure that you do not fall behind the pace you've planned. Why is it important? Well, it ensures timely delivery, right? And we want to stay on schedule, because guess what? We're over schedule or we're behind schedule. That means that we're probably going to be over budget, right? Because we're working. It depends on how your project is oriented and what you're solving for and what industry you're in. But sometimes that can mean that you're over budget as well. And ensuring that timely delivery is going to help you as a project manager because, one, that's your job, is to make sure that when you're dealing with a predictive project, you are within that finite time that you have established in your project management plan. 2, it supports project planning and stakeholder confidence. Accurately tracking the schedule as well as control over the schedule allows stakeholders to remain informed about the project's timeline. And then 3, it prevents schedule slippage. Delays in one area of the project can impact subsequent tasks, causing cascading delays. And control schedule ensures that the actions are taken to prevent minor delays from turning into significant schedule slippage. Sorry, I got a lot of slack. Now moving on to the ITOs for control schedule. So inputs that you'll use: control schedule or project management plan, project schedule, work performance data. Like, read through these things. These are some of the same inputs, tools and techniques. Performance reviews. So we haven't talked about this, so I'll go over. Performance reviews are used to assess project progress. This includes techniques like schedule variance and schedule performance index. Know those two, right? Those are going to be on the project management professional certification exam. You need to know those two. Do some more research if you need to, but learn what that is. Schedule variance, schedule performance index. When you see key terms that are bolded, make sure you're taking note of. Also, the critical path method, right? The critical path method is used to determine which tasks are critical to meeting the project deadline. If delays occur in these tasks, it directly impacts the overall project timeline. 3, schedule compression, right? Schedule compression techniques such as crashing, adding resources to reduce activity duration, or fast tracking, performing activities in parallel are used to bring the project back on track when delays are detected. Now, this is something that you most often will see. You'll see multiple questions on fast tracking or crashing or using which one during a certain situation. So you need to understand when to use which, right? And so as you go through some of these mock exams, you'll see look at how the answers convey when you should use crashing or fast tracking, but also look at some more techniques and look in the PMBOK and try to gain a deeper understanding to what these are and how you would use them, because they are going to be on the exam. Outputs of controlled schedule progress or process. 1, schedule forecasts, right? Schedule forecasts provide updated predictions on the project timeline based on the current performance data. These forecasts help determine if the project is likely to meet its original timelines or deadlines, or if adjustments are needed. Change requests. Change requests are another output that you could see. If you're deviating from the schedule, right, you may need to put in a change request in order to adjust the baseline. 6, control costs, right? So as you can see, control scope, control schedule, control costs. These are repeating thing, right? We're worried about the schedule. We're worried about the budget, right? The cost. We're worried about the scope. These are the main concepts that I want you to grasp. The control cost process involves monitoring the project's cost performance to ensure it stays within the approved budget. It helps track spending, measure financial performance, and implement corrective actions if the cost deviates from the cost baseline. Why is it important? It prevents cost overruns, right? Control cost ensures that the project stays within the approved budget. By monitoring spending and identifying deviations early, corrective actions can be taken to prevent cost overruns. It also improves financial predictability. The process generates cost forecasts, which help predict the project's financial needs and ensures that there are enough resources available to complete the project. And then finally, it supports stakeholder confidence. Accurate cost control ensures stakeholders are confident that the project is being managed effectively and that funds are used appropriately. So what are the ITTOs for this? What are the inputs? Project management plan. Project funding requirements. We haven't talked about this. The project funding requirements specify how the funding is needed and when. This helps to ensure that sufficient funds are available when needed to support project activities. Here's an example there. Also, we use work performance data, right? It provides information on the costs that have been incurred so far, and this data is used to compare to actual costs against the cost baseline and determine if corrective action is required. That's going to help. That's where you analyze trends and stuff like that in order to determine whether or not the variance is enough for you to put a change request in. So tools and techniques for controlling costs, earned value management, right? And this is something I really want to go over because all 3 of these are going to be on the test. So earned value management, right? Earned value management is a key tool for cost control. It integrates scope, schedule, and cost data to provide an accurate picture of the project performance. Key metrics include cost variance, right, which measures the difference between the earned value and the actual cost, and then cost performance index, right, measures cost efficiency by comparing the value of work completed to the actual cost spent. Example is if the CPI is less than 1.0, it indicates that the project is spending more than planned, and corrective actions are needed to control costs. 2, trend analysis, right? So you use trend analysis, which helps predict the future project costs based on historical data. It is used to identify potential cost overruns before they occur. This is when you'd be looking at trends, and CPI. Before we move on to the last one, CPI and EVM is going to be 2 major concepts that you'll see on the exam. So make sure you understand what they are, because as you move forward, they will be utilized. You will see them on the mock exams. You will see them on the real exams, and so understand them. And also in the back of the book, it talks about them. Understand how they're used, how they're calculated, right? The equations that go with them. I have equations in the back of the book for you to reference. A lot of the resources that you need are either in the day-to-day chapters or they're in the back of the book, right? So it's going to have all the equations that you need to, all the information that you need to know on these tools and techniques, because they're going to ask you to solve problems using these tools and techniques. Trend analysis, right? We just talked about it. And then to complete performance index, or TCPI, is used to determine the cost performance needed to complete the remaining work within the project's budget. It helps guide decision making regarding resource allocation, right? So output for control cost process is cost forecasts and change requests, kind of similar to schedule forecasts, but it basically provides updated predictions about the total cost of the project based on current spending trends. 7, monitor risk, right? And so now we're getting into the portion that is, I want to say very important, but I say very important all the time. So I'm just gonna go with it. The portion that's very important. Monitor risk process involves tracking identified risks, monitoring residual risk, and identifying new risks, and evaluating the effectiveness of the risk response actions throughout the project lifecycle. As an example there, you can read it if you want to. I'm not going to. Why is monitor risk important, right? Provides ongoing risk awareness. The monitor risks process ensures that the risks are continually monitored and regressed throughout the project, allowing the project team to adapt as conditions change, right? And you want to be able to adapt as conditions change, because that's going to bring up new risks. A lot of times in the planning phase, you can plan all you want to, and you can plan a million risk mitigation techniques, but what will happen is once you implement one of those risk mitigation techniques, it changes the course of your project. You may have implemented a change request, right? And so now it changed the scope, or now it changed the budget, or now it changed the schedule, right? And so now it's going to incur new risks that you didn't account. So that's why you have to be adaptable. Improves risk response effectiveness, right? By monitoring how well the risk response actions are working, the team can determine whether adjustments are needed to better manage risk. And then it also identifies new risk. As the project progresses, new risks can emerge. Monitoring risks allows for identification of these risks, ensuring that they are assessed and managed in a timely manner. Yeah. So inputs that you'll see for monitoring risks is a project management plan, risk register, right? So risk register is a dynamic document that lists all identified risks, their potential impact, response strategies, and current status. It is updated regularly to reflect the current state of project risk. Work performance data. Work performance data includes information on the project progress and any deviations from the plan. And here are some tools and techniques that you use for monitoring risk, right? Risk audit. Risk audits involve a systematic review of the risk management process and the effectiveness of risk responses. These audits help determine whether risks are being managed appropriately, right? So a risk audit might reveal that the response to a specific risk, i.e. equipment failure, was not effective, prompting adjustments to risk response strategy. You also use variance and trend analysis, right? We talked about this. And then meetings, right? Risk review meetings are held regularly to discuss the status of risks and determine whether any adjustments are needed to risk response strategy. And some outputs that you'll have is risk register updates, right? You're constantly updating your risk register as new risks occur or they come to light. And then risk reports, right? Risk reports provide the overview of the risk status, including which risks are active, their potential impact, and the effectiveness of responses that have been. 8, control quality process, right? The process is focused on inspecting and testing deliverables to ensure that they meet the defined quality standards. This process helps verify that the project outputs are of high quality and meet stakeholder expectations. Imagine you're manufacturing a batch of custom furniture. After the pieces are assembled, you would inspect them to ensure that the quality meets the customer standards, checking for things like proper finishing, stability, adherence to specifications. Control quality works similarly, verifying that the project deliverables meet quality criteria before they are handed over to the stakeholders. Why is it important? Well, it ensures deliverables meet the requirement, right? We talked about quality previously, but control quality processes ensure that the deliverables meet the quality standards defined in the quality management plan, helping to avoid rework or dissatisfaction, things that you most evidently want to avoid as a project manager. It reduces defects and rework and build stakeholder confidence, not only in the team, not only in the process, but in you, right? So inputs to control quality, project management plan, quality metrics, right? Quality metrics are specified measurements used to assess the quality of deliverables. These metrics help determine whether the deliverables meet the desired quality standards. And you also use the deliverables, right? They're inspected to verify quality criteria. You need the deliverables in order to inspect anything, right? Tools and techniques that you'll see: inspection, statistical sampling, right? Involves testing a representative sample of deliverables, and then control charts, right? Where they're used to monitor whether a process is stable and within acceptable limits. Outputs control quality process. Quality control measurements, right? They are results of inspections and testing. They provide data that can be analyzed to determine whether the deliverables meet quality standards. And then you also have verified deliverables, right? Deliverables that have been inspected and meet the quality criteria. Finally, getting into 9. The 9th and last one that we'll talk about here in this phase is the control procurement process. The control procurement process involves managing relationships with vendors, ensuring that the contractual obligations are met, and making any necessary changes to contracts. It helps ensure that external suppliers deliver on time and that the goods and services meet the agreed specification. Imagine you're organizing a large event and have hired several vendors for catering, audiovisual setup, and decorations. Control procurement is about ensuring that each of these vendors delivers what they agreed to on time and to the expected quality level. If a vendor fails to deliver as promised, corrective actions must be taken to address this issue. So why is it important? It ensures contractual compliance, as control procurement ensures that vendors fulfill their contractual obligations, which helps to avoid delays, quality issues, and financial losses. It also mitigates procurement risks by continuously monitoring vendor performance. The project team can identify risks related to procurement early and take corrective action. Facilitates vendor relationships. Maintaining healthy relationships with vendors is crucial for project success. This process helps ensure that the communication remains clear and that any disputes are resolved promptly. What this is used to do, what this process is here for, is to ensure you get what you paid for, right? You are paying for a service, paying for a product from a vendor, right? And you have this contractual agreement between the two of you that says, hey, I'm paying you this amount. I'm expecting it to be delivered this on this date or serviced on this date, and you have agreed to these terms, and this is the quality that I expect, right? To these specifications. You have agreed that you can meet all those things, right? And so if you don't meet all those things, then consequences, probably litigation, potential litigation is gonna happen, and there's gonna be a problem between us two, and whether you're gonna refund us, right, or give us our money back, or make up for the financial loss or schedule loss that we had here. And so it's important that you have this control procurement process, because it ensures that you get what you paid for, you get what you agreed on, and everything runs smoothly. So inputs that you'll see is the procurement management plan, right? It outlines how procurement activities will be managed, including vendor selection, contract management, and performance tracking. And then you have procurement documents, right? And they include contracts, agreements, and purchase orders that define what vendors are expected to deliver and the terms under which they will operate. And then you have some agreements, right, which outline the roles, responsibilities, and expectations for both the buyer and the seller. They provide the basis for managing the relationship with vendors, right? And so you see this a lot in any dealing with any business. I had a company that dealt with I had a company that dealt with government contracting, fulfillment, logistical orders. You know, we would deliver stuff like office supplies, TVs, stuff like that, right? And when you go through some of these RFPs, you go through some of these RFQs, right, you have these agreements that are probably already pre-drafted up. You just have to adjust them, and you have the agreements that say, okay, what is the rule? What is the expectation for both of us in this situation, right? You have the procurement documents that talk about, and the purchase orders. You know, what are we purchasing from, right? When do we expect it to be delivered, right? How will we do quality control? Like, how will we assess whether or not this product is what we were looking to receive, right? It's important that you have this process for yourself, because as the project manager, you're the one that's usually receiving the products, or you're the one that's usually receiving the services, and you want to make sure you're getting what you're paying for, because you have a finite amount of budget and time frame that you have to work within. Tools and techniques for controlling procurements, right? Performance reviews. Performance reviews involve evaluating vendor performance against contractual requirements to determine whether vendors are meeting their obligations. You have audits. Procurement audits are formal evaluations of the procurement process to determine whether it is being conducted in compliance with policies and agreements. And then claims administration, right? It involves managing disputes with vendors. Claims might arise if one party fails to fulfill contractual agreement or obligation. And they will need to be resolved in a fair and timely manner. So with that, you have some outputs of procurement documentation updates, which includes changes to contracts, agreements, and performance records, and then change requests, right? When procurement issues arise that require change requests may be submitted to modify contracts. So some common tools and techniques that you'll see in this phase: variance analysis, change control tools, inspection, right? We went through all those. They have the definition as well as the examples down below. Make sure you read through them. And then we have challenges in monitoring and controlling process group, frequent scope changes, right? Uncontrolled changes disrupt project baselines. Solution is used to perform integrated change control process to manage changes formally. Poor communication, right? Delays in sharing performance data lead to misaligned expectations. And then inaccurate data, right? Faulty performance reports create misleading insights, and use reliable tools to double check data accuracy, right? It's important that you have accurate data because then you can plan off of that. If you have inaccurate data, you're going to be planning off of bad data, and it's not going to correlate, right? And then when you end up with a bad product, or you end up behind schedule, or you end up over budget, you're gonna have to do a root analysis call and figure out where you went wrong. Practice scenarios, right? So I want you to go through these scenarios. Like I said, read through them, think about how you would handle them, and then read the answer insight as it's PMI aligned. It's just to help you gain some insight into what the PMI mindset is and how you should be. And then go through some practice questions, right? Like I said before on the previous chapter, with each practice question, I'm gonna have a playlist that you can go to on my YouTube channel. Go to the playlist, look at practice questions for day 11, and you'll be able to gain some understanding of how I execute and how I address some of these problems as we go through each question, jotting down why I think this is the right answer, why I don't think this is the right answer. Maybe it'll help you understand a little bit better and gain that PMI mindset. So without further ado, we're at the end of day reflection. The monitoring and controlling process group ensures that the project remains aligned with its baselines and objectives. Reflect on how effectively you've managed performance and changes in previous projects. Were you able to maintain control and avoid scope creep? Tomorrow, we'll move to the closing process group, focusing on wrapping up the project and documenting lessons learned. If you still want to study, there's a processing map game QR code down below, as well as the flashcards QR code. Make sure you're hitting those every single day, practicing them on your off time, because that's going to help you move forward and gain a deeper understanding quicker than all of your peers. If at day 11 you understand which process goes where, you're way ahead of your peers. And that was the point of this book, is to make sure that you are prepared in 30 days to take the PMP exam. Without further ado, if you haven't already, like and subscribe, hit the notification bell. I appreciate you making it this far, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.